Right now on Morning News Now, tariff turmoil. International markets kicking off the week in the red again, while U.S. futures point toward another painful day ahead on Wall Street as global markets react to President Trump's sweeping tariffs. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent dismissing fears about a recession.
There doesn't have to be a recession. Who knows how the market is going to react in a day, in a week. What we are looking at is building the long-term economic fundamentals for prosperity that I think the previous administration had put us on a course toward financial calamity.
We'll have more on what he said about whether the president is open to negotiating lower levies. Also this morning, state of emergency in the South and Midwest. Deadly storms and tornadoes tearing through several states, and torrential rains triggering historic flooding over the weekend. We'll have the latest forecast as we track another potential threat in the Southeast today. Plus, growing outbreak. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in Texas after a second child dies from the measles. Hundreds of cases now reported in at least 21 states. We'll speak with a doctor about what you need to know to stay safe as we get closer to Easter holiday gatherings. And glory restored. UConn reclaims their throne in women's college basketball after dominating South Carolina in last night's final. We're going to speak to their legendary head coach about the big win later this hour. We'll also have a preview of what to expect as the spotlight turns to the men's national championship tonight, wrapping up another exciting year of March Madness. I promise I'm wearing orange this morning. It's not for Florida. I'm totally impartial about tonight's final. Good to have you with us on this Monday morning. I'm Joe Fryer. Savannah Sellers is on assignment. We begin our show with the ongoing financial turmoil brought on by President Trump's trade tariffs. Overnight, the global market rout intensified. Asian stocks closed deep in the red. In Europe, markets are currently plunging. Well, here in America, Wall Street is bracing for another potentially bad day, with U.S. stock futures pointing to another big sell-off. On Sunday, the president again defended his tariffs and downplayed the market moves, saying, quote, sometimes you have to take medicine to fix something. It's a sentiment that was echoed by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who appeared on Meet the Press with NBC's Kristen Welker yesterday. Here's more from Kristen.
This week on Meet the Press, I spoke to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent about President Trump's tariffs, which triggered the worst stock market week in 5 years. As I just laid out at the top of the program, the markets lost more than $6 trillion in value. Was this disruption always part of the plan, Mr. Secretary?
Look, markets are organic, animals, and you never know what the reaction's going to be. One thing that I can tell you as the Treasury Secretary, what I've been very impressed with is the market infrastructure, that we had record volume on Friday, and everything is working very smoothly, so the American people can be very take great comfort in that. And in terms of the market reaction, look, we get these short-term market reactions from time to time. The market consistently underestimates Donald Trump. I remember that in 2016, the night President Trump won, the market crashed. And it turned out he was going to be the most pro-business president in over a century, maybe in the history of the country. And we went on to very high after inflation returns for the next 4 years.
You can see my full interview and a lot more at meetthepress.com. You can also get more Meet the Press here on NBC News Now every weekday at 4 p.m.
Kristen, thank you. NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Chung joins us now for more on all this. So obviously another bad day for global markets. What is Wall Street bracing for, not just today, but really this week?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, we saw it in the Asian markets. It's happening in the European markets now. But that sell-off that really capped the end of last week, it looks like it's going to start its extension this Monday. So you look at the Hang Seng Index down 13%. Japanese markets down 7 to 8%. Europe markets down 3 to 4%. I mean, it is just looking deeply red, which points to another deeply red day in the United States as well. And Joe, I think what's so interesting about all of this is that there weren't really any more developments over the weekend. It's not like a number of other countries announced any sort of big retaliatory measures, but I think that there's just a lot of fear going into this week because what happens on Wednesday, that's the day that the reciprocal tariffs, the so-called reciprocal tariffs rather, are set to take effect. It's after that day, basically, where it becomes fair game, a live ball, if you will, for other countries to then slap on their own retaliatory tariffs. That's actually the day that the Chinese retaliatory tariffs, which were announced last week, would take effect, another 34% on top of U.S. goods that are now going to China. It's going to be a very, very busy week as far as the news headlines go, and I think that's what Wall Street and investors are worried about.
So we know over the past week, banks, economists have really upped the risk that we're going to have a recession. The odds seem much higher. We did hear from the Federal Reserve Chair late last week. How's the Fed viewing all of this?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, when the tariff talk was happening prior to the actual announcements, right? I mean, the president had been talking about these potential tariffs well before he was even elected. He was saying it on the campaign trail. People were saying, well, it might be a temporary inflation spike as we see prices go up, as the people that have to pay these tariffs pass it on to consumers. But the Federal Reserve Chairman, Jerome Powell, suggested for the first time that there could be a risk of it staying even longer term. Take a listen.
It is now becoming clear that tariff increases will be significantly larger than expected. And the same is likely to be true of the economic effects, which will include higher inflation and slower growth. While tariffs are highly likely to generate at least a temporary rise in inflation, it's also possible that the effects could be more persistent.
More persistent. And the reason why we listen to the Fed chair is because he's essentially the steward of the U.S. economy. He's the one that steers interest rates to try to get us clear of a recession. He's not using the R word, but you do have these questions over the likes of, Jamie Dimon over at J.P. Morgan. He just had a letter out this morning saying that tariffs will likely boost inflation, slowing an already weakening U.S. economy. And his own economics team has projected that a recession is likely in 2025.
Folks are, of course, looking for an off-ramp. If the president did just suddenly pull the plug on all of these tariffs, is the theory that Wall Street would just sort of rebound and things might get back to where they were before? Or don't we know?
Well, I mean, in theory, yes. But I think the bigger question is whether or not President Trump would want to do that. I mean, obviously, our White House team is much more dialed into the politics of that. But I think that it should be no surprise to anyone that we have heard members of his administration go on the Sunday shows yesterday and basically say these are going to be here to stay. I mean, Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, was speaking at CBS Face the Nation and said that these tariffs are likely to be around for weeks. So I think that even if there is a negotiating tactic here, I mean, we got some mixed messages on whether or not it is for negotiation. It sounds like, according to the administration, over 50 countries have phoned the White House asking them to lower tariffs. Maybe they're open to some sort of deal. But if that deal won't happen for weeks from now, then I think that the stock market slide and the general malaise that we have about this economy is probably going to stay as well.
We're already seeing some companies adjust how they're doing things right now. Land Rover, Nintendo, what are we hearing here?
Yeah, well, Land Rover and Jaguar say that they're not going to be shipping to the United States with these tariffs in effect. Nintendo, interestingly, they have this brand new console called the Nintendo Switch 2 that was slated to come out later on this spring. They were going to open for pre-orders. They made their announcement of it before the tariffs happened. After the tariffs happened, they said, we are not going to open up pre-orders to the United States for right now. They haven't delayed the release date yet. But, Joe, this just underscores that all of these major companies, these recognizable name brands, are in some cases not even going to be able to ship their products to the United States. So we've been talking a lot about potential price increases. Okay, yeah, it might be more expensive for you to buy that product with the 25, 30, 54% tariff on that product. But I think another question is whether or not the product will even be available in the United States, with some companies saying if we have to pay that added cost, then maybe we just won't have that product at all. For those like me who made the mistake of looking at your 401k late Friday or seeing what's happened to your investments, there's a lot of anxiety right now. What is the best advice people are offering right now for folks who are feeling anxious? Yeah, and again, it looks like this week is going to be another pretty volatile week as well. And I think that the idea is that if you had an investment strategy prior to last week, prior to last Wednesday's Rose Garden announcement, don't change your strategy off of a few bad days on the stock market. Yes, it's going to be very unnerving how much you've seen lost in just terms of percentage. But the idea is that if you weren't going to tap that money for 10, 20, 30 years over that type of long time horizon, stocks generally tend to go up. Now, if you are in retirement or getting close to retirement right now, that's where you might want to consult a financial advisor to see if you're really allocated in the right places. Could you move things around to really take advantage of maybe tax loss harvesting? That's something you need to talk to directly with your financial advisor. But the key is to just don't freak out, especially if you're going to hold on to it long term anyway.
All right. Brian Chung, good to have you with us. Thank you, Brian. Well, Americans are bracing for the full impact of sweeping tariffs. Many took to the streets over the weekend to protest the Trump administration. It's a scene that played out all across the country. Organizers said there were more than 1,000 hands-off demonstrations coast to coast showing their opposition to the president. They expressed their dismay and anger over the White House's deportation policies. They also called out efforts by Trump advisor Elon Musk to downsize the federal government. NBC News White House correspondent Yamiche Alcindor joins us now with more on this. Yamiche, good morning. So let's start where we just left off with tariffs. We know President Trump spent the weekend in Florida before returning to Washington. Clearly, he's digging in despite how things are looking right now with global markets. What is Mr. Trump saying about all this?
Well, President Trump is really doubling down on his economic strategy, and he is also saying that this is going to have long-term good effects for the U.S. economy, saying at one point that he believes that this is going to make the country $1 trillion, though, of course, economists have said that this is really a tax on the American people and that you're going to see prices go up. We've also heard the Fed chair say that this could slow the U.S. economy. But the president talked specifically about tariffs and his strategy, and he made an interesting metaphor. Take a listen.
I don't want anything to go down, but sometimes you have to take medicine to fix something. I spoke to a lot of leaders, European, Asian, from all over the world. They're dying to make a deal, but I said, we're not going to have deficits with your country. We're not going to do that, because to me a deficit is a loss.
So that was the president aboard Air Force One yesterday. And what he was saying was that sometimes you might have to take medicine. So he was essentially saying that this market situation with the Dow going down and the market plummeting in the way that it has, that this is really in some ways just the country having to do what it has to do to get through this necessary pain. He was questioned specifically on whether or not he did this on purpose, because over the weekend he reposted something that said President Trump is playing chess while the rest of the world is playing checkers. And there was a hint there that he may have done this on purpose, but he's saying, no, he did not do that. He also was questioned about whether or not there was a threshold of pain that would be too much for him to bear. And the president said that was a, quote, stupid question. And in fact, that this is just sort of what people have to do. And then on the other side of this, he believes his economic strategy will be beneficial.
So, Yamiche, are we hearing from anyone inside the Republican Party who is uneasy with how this tariff plan is playing out?
It's a critical question. Right now, we have heard from at least one lawmaker in the House, a Republican who has put up a bill to try to wrestle back some power from President Trump when it comes to tariffs. There's a similar bill in the Senate, though neither one of those bills seem like they're going to see the light of day. And it's hard to see the Republican Party coalesce around a strategy that they would really be trying to take power away from President Trump, because that would be very critical. The thing here to remember, though, is that Republican lawmakers, they're thinking about 2026 and the midterms, since a lot of them are up for re-election. The president, unless he finds a way to run for a third term, which would most likely violate the U.S. Constitution, he is right now seen as a lame duck, so he isn't going to have some of the same political backlash that the Republican Party might face and lawmakers might face. That being said, you're not seeing a big break from Republicans when it comes to the president on this issue right now, Joe.
Let's talk about those protests we saw all across the U.S. over the weekend. Protesters took part in more than 1,200 events organized by Democratic activists. Just walk us through what we saw and what their message was.
Well, we saw protests across the country, but we also saw protests even abroad in places like Paris and other cities. And what we saw were protesters really voicing anger at two people in particular. One, of course, President Trump, saying that his policies have really hurt the American economy, that they've also led to cruel, they think, layoffs and cuts when it comes to different agencies and departments. But there was also a lot of blame and anger pointed at Elon Musk, who, of course, while he's not officially the head of the Department of Government Efficiency, he is someone who is seen as the face of it and is seen as someone who's been pushing for a lot of these draconian cuts that we've seen in places like the Department of Education and Health and Human Services. So protesters were essentially saying that they were coming to the streets because they were angry about the way that things are going. And there was, of course, a lot of backlash when it came to the economy as well, with some people saying that President Trump was really leading our country down the road of a recession. So a lot of a voice there. And it's really interesting because while the president has not been in office for even 100 days, what we've seen is sort of this is the first big mass protest movement. It wasn't like 2016 when he came into office. You saw a lot of protests on the front end. So this was, I think, significant for that, Joe.
All right. Yamiche, thank you so much. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in Washington this morning. He'll head to the White House to meet with President Trump about the war in Gaza and to talk tariffs. Now, this will be the second meeting between the two leaders since Mr. Trump entered office for his second term in January. Despite efforts by the Trump administration to try to end the war, the U.S. has expressed support for Israel's renewed offensive in Gaza. It was a deadly weekend in the enclave. Israel's defense minister ordered an expansion of operations on Sunday following rocket fire from Gaza. And this morning, the Palestinian Media Forum says that the IDF killed and injured journalists who were resting in a media tent in Han Yunis. NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley joins us now from Tel Aviv with the latest. Matt, good morning. So what do we know about Prime Minister Netanyahu's visit to the White House today? It does seem like they have a lot to talk about, not just what's happening in Gaza, but also trade policy.
That's right. The trade policy thing is a really interesting wrinkle to that Washington, Jerusalem, Tel Aviv relationship that really had been seen to blossom over the past couple of months ever since Trump took office. I think it's clear from the reports we're reading in the Israeli media that the Israelis were very surprised to see that the Trump administration were slapping 17% tariffs on the Israelis, one of the closest allies of the Americans and one of the closest allies of Donald Trump. So this meeting, and we saw that the premier of Israel arrived last night in Washington and had a meeting that was hastily arranged with Howard Lutnick, the U.S. Secretary of Commerce. Today, he's going to be meeting with Donald Trump in just a few hours. He's going to be pleading with the U.S. president to try to waive most, if not all, of those tariffs. And this is the first time that we've actually seen a world leader going to Washington and appealing to the president in person, hat in hand. And, Joe, I think given the headlines, given the stock market, we can expect to see just this kind of behavior from many foreign leaders over the course of the next several weeks and months.
Matt, let's talk about what's happening in the Middle East. The Palestinian Red Crescent is demanding an investigation into the killing of 15 emergency workers near Rafah last month. That's after video emerged that contradicts the Israeli military's account of what happened. We do want to warn our viewers, this video is disturbing. But Matt, walk us through what happened and how the Israeli military is responding.
Yeah, I mean, to the extent that you're seeing this in this video, you're seeing marked emergency vehicles showing up late last month to the scene of an incident. They park and they get out. And then, according to this video that was found on the corpse of one of those slain 15 rescue workers, they actually had some level of communication. There was Arabic heard and Hebrew heard, an interchange of words between the soldiers and the emergency workers before the soldiers opened fire. And we heard over the weekend that the Israelis, late last week, the Israelis said in a rare acknowledgement that they were actually mistaken about their earlier statements about this. They had said previously that, in fact, these emergency vehicles were unmarked. Their lights weren't blinking, which you can clearly see in that video, and that they fired because they were just afraid that these were actually militants. They even went so far as to say that some 9 out of the 15 of those killed were actually recognized militants from Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. We've heard various different numbers coming out with no evidence from the Israelis that any of these men were in fact belonging to any listed terrorist organizations. So this is becoming a broadening scandal for the Israeli government, just as Netanyahu lands in Washington, D.C.
And Matt, what more can you tell us about Israel's attack on Han Yunis and what we're learning about the victims there?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing a big attack against Han Yunis just yesterday. Dozens killed. There were about 53 people who were killed, according to Palestinian health officials in the Gaza Strip, over just the past 24 hours. Now, one notable example of this was a strike against a tent that housed journalists in the Gaza Strip. We saw a very, very graphic video that showed that tent in flames with at least one person who looked like they were burning themselves. 2 people were killed, 9 people were injured. One of those was a journalist. That means that death is about more than 200 journalists who have been killed, according to Palestinian health officials, since the beginning of the latest round of fighting back in 2023. Joe.
All right. Matt Bradley. Matt, thank you so much. Over the last week, round after round of severe spring weather in the South has killed at least 21 people across 6 states. Several tornadoes were reported throughout the South over the weekend. That includes this one in Mississippi, which tore through homes, leaving destruction in its wake. And several southern states have declared states of emergency, with torrential rains triggering historic flooding there. In Arkansas, heavy wind and rain tore down trees, some slamming into homes. The National Guard was pressed into service. Troops delivered water in the central part of Arkansas after a lightning strike seriously damaged a town's water system. The rain has mostly ended. The danger has not. NBC News correspondent Maggie Vespa has the latest from hard-hit Kentucky.
America's days-long stretch of deadly spring weather marked by widespread flooding across the Midwest and South, with water still rising.
We've never dealt with anything like this.
Really?
Yeah, no, nothing like this as far as the amount of water we have.
Drone video shows Dawson Springs, Kentucky submerged, water covering a substation, forcing crews to temporarily cut power. Farmer Austin Chappell using a boat to feed his stranded cows.
The Lord gave us some cattle, it's our duty to take care of them.
States of emergency declared across the South. In Mississippi, a suspected tornado tore through homes, leaving a trail of debris. In Arkansas, drenching rains tore down trees, some slamming into houses. Our George Solis is there.
Some here in Little Rock are dealing with more than just cleanup. This homeowner now recovering in the hospital after being trapped for hours, needing help from more than just firefighters on the scene, but also a doctor.
Researchers say these types of flood emergencies are getting worse amid the climate crisis, with a warming atmosphere capable of holding more water. This week, water levels in some spots are expected to rise for days. Kathy Park is in Memphis.
The floodwaters are ending up right here in the Mississippi River. You can see how high it's running right now, even carrying away large pieces of debris. River flooding continues to be a threat this week.
The deadly weather taking a toll, with fatalities across multiple states, including Kentucky. 9-year-old Gabriel Andrews was swept away by flash floodwaters there, the coroner says, walking to his school bus Friday.
We are deeply saddened at this horrific tragedy that claimed the life of one of our students.
All right, thanks to Maggie Vespa and our team for that report. While the rain is slowing down, the waters in flooded areas will not crest for several days. So what can the Southeast expect next? Let's get your morning news now. Weather. Meteorologist Michelle Grossman is tracking it all for us. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. Yeah, we're going to continue to watch those rivers in the Mid-South to the Ohio Valley very closely over the next several days, because river flooding takes longer and it lasts longer. So something we're going to watch. A lot of the gauges are at moderate stages at this point, and we're looking at that increasing as we go throughout the next couple of days. Now, we are still unsettled. This is the same front that brought that catastrophic weather the past 5 days, let's say. Today, we are looking at rain falling, but we're not expecting the flooding amounts that we saw. We could see over 3 inches in some spots, but that would be isolated. We do have heavy rain falling, and we do have severe weather. The Southeast will be the bullseye for the severe weather today. And you can notice how long this front is, from the Gulf Coast all the way to portions of New England. On the colder side of this, the northern side of the front, we are looking at snow falling in portions of New England into the Great Lakes, a wintry mix in the interior parts of the Northeast. So this continues to be a problem as we go throughout this Monday. It will finally move off the coast as we go throughout tonight into tomorrow. Severe weather threat, the bullseye again in the Southeast from Columbia to Savannah, Tallahassee, Gainesville. We could see winds gusting up to 60 miles per hour with any of these storms. A tornado or two is possible. We've already tracked radar indicated tornadoes this morning, and we're looking at the hail risk. It's low, but it's not zero. So that will be a concern as well, along with that heavy rain. This is what it looks like. That front is finally on the move. It was parked for so many days. That's why we had that catastrophic flooding. It is moving, but it is moving slowly. We'll finally move off the coast later on tonight into tomorrow morning. We're going to see some lingering rain in Florida tomorrow, and also some lingering snow in New England, because that's a secondary front that's going to reinforce some cold air there. It's going to bring accumulating snow to portions of New Hampshire, Vermont, into Maine. That will be the story for tomorrow. And then stronger winds ushering colder temperatures. A lot of us in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic will feel that cold air. Rainfall forecast, we're looking at quite a bit in some spots where you see those yellows and oranges and reds. That's where we're looking at the heaviest amounts. And again, some will see isolated amounts over 3 inches. And when it comes to the snow, we're going to see that as well. Now, we are concerned about flash flooding. Flash flooding is quick as opposed to river flooding. Again, that takes longer. Flash flooding is quick, so you need to heed any warnings that you may see throughout the day, from Norfolk to Wilmington, Charlotte, Charleston, Brunswick, down to Gainesville, over to Pensacola. Pensacola, you're in a slight risk there. The rest, we're looking at a minor risk with that green shading. Snowfall forecast, we're looking at accumulating snow in northern parts of Maine over 5 inches. April snow there in New Hampshire and also in Vermont. Speaking about these river floodings, we're looking at all these dots. These are rivers where we're looking at the gauges. So we're expecting the worst flooding over the next seven days. Moderate flooding, that is in the red. Where you see the purple, that is major flooding. So that is something that we need to watch closely. That is the big story by far throughout the day. In the middle of the country, we are looking at really chilly highs for April, 10 to 15, 20 degrees below what is typical for this time of year. This morning, we have freeze warnings. Tomorrow, we're going to see freeze warnings in spots as well, because temperatures will dip into the 20s and 30s. Daytime highs well below normal for this time of year, into the 40s in Minneapolis, 41. That's 13 degrees below what is typical for this time of year. And Joe, we're looking at 46 degrees in New York City. A chilly day today, and then another chilly day with the winds blowing tomorrow on Tuesday. Back to you.
All right, Michelle, thank you so much. Much more to come here on Morning News Now. Later this hour, college basketball glory. We're going through all the highlights from the Huskies' big win over the weekend and what to expect as Florida prepares to take on Houston in tonight's men's final. Up first, deportation deadline. The Trump administration has just hours left to comply with a judge's order to return a Maryland father who was wrongfully deported back to the U.S. We're going to break down the case with a legal expert when we come back. This morning, the clock is ticking on a federal judge's court order to return Kilmar Abrego Garcia to the U.S. The legal U.S. resident was deported to El Salvador nearly a month ago. On Friday, the judge ordered the Trump administration to bring the Maryland father back home by midnight tonight. But the Justice Department clearly has no plans to seek his return. NBC's Vaughn Hilliard has the latest.
The White House fighting efforts to return Kilmar Abrego Garcia to the United States, as a federal judge condemned Sunday the Trump administration, saying his detention appears wholly lawless. Judge Paula Zinnes saying the risk of harm to Abrego Garcia in the mega prison shocks the conscience. ICE detained and deported Abrego Garcia more than 3 weeks ago. A husband and father with no criminal conviction, Abrego Garcia was granted legal status in the country in 2019.
What word have you received from the government that Mr. Garcia, that they will work in good faith to bring him back to the United States?
I have to assume that if there's an enforceable order of the court that's not stayed by a higher court, that the government is going to follow that order. They sent Abrego Garcia down to El Salvador. They need to ask for him back.
The administration has maintained that Abrego Garcia is affiliated with the MS-13 gang. His family and attorney deny it, and the Department of Justice's own lawyer acknowledging in court, quote, the absence of evidence in its case. This weekend, Attorney General Pam Bondi placed that lawyer on administrative leave.
He did not argue. He shouldn't have taken the case.
Trump's border czar Tom Homan openly urging Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele to deny the U.S. court's order. The administration providing millions of dollars to El Salvador to house the deportees. And Bukele has not committed to sending Abrego Garcia back. The family hopeful.
I'm fighting for him. All of us are fighting. And the kids are waiting for him.
Vaughn Hilliard, NBC News.
NBC News legal analyst Danny Ceballos joins us now with more on this case. All right, so we know that the DOJ wanted this judge to put the order on hold. Well, they appealed. The judge said no. It looks like this deadline is going to come and go, and this guy's not coming back. What are the options now? How does this play out?
This is where it gets really interesting, because the traditional rule for defiance of a court order is some form of contempt, civil, possibly criminal. Civil contempt is designed to say, here's a punishment until you do what I want you to do. Criminal is the idea that what you did is already considered a crime. Therefore, you're in contempt, you're punished, and really it doesn't matter as much whether you comply with the order. So then the thorny question becomes, who gets held in contempt if that is the path that we're heading on here? So it is a really difficult issue to resolve. But generally speaking, defiance of a court order results in contempt.
So the Trump administration claims a federal judge doesn't have the authority to demand Abrego Garcia's return. It's appealed to the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. Who has jurisdiction here? I mean, is this a legal matter? Does this become something diplomats have to figure out? Where are we at here?
I cannot stress enough how crazy this decision is and what's happened over the last couple days, because the government's argument is that, look, we made a mistake. He should not have been removed from this country. We are in the wrong. However, even though we're in the wrong, you, court, have no power over us because he's already gone. Oopsie daisy, nothing else that can be done. That was the argument of the government in court And it's become a rather difficult issue for the government and the attorney who made the argument, because now he's been administratively separated or put on leave. So really, the government's argument here has always been not that they didn't do anything wrong. They admit that they did. It's just that you don't have any jurisdiction to order us back. But here's what the court pointed out. In filing a habeas petition, traditionally you challenge the detention. And the government's argument is there's no one, the only one who has him now is another country. But the court pointed out this is not about wrongful detention. This is about wrongful removal. And I do, as the court, have power over that.
Does the government have a strong argument here? Have we seen an argument like this before?
In a sense, their argument is interesting, but it's a principle of American law that you can't do something blatantly, galactically wrong and then say, well, now that the person's out of the country, you don't have jurisdiction. And by the way, a good point to be made is we use extradition, and extradition is legally a very different thing, but we do reach out and grab people from other countries through extradition treaties. So the idea that there's just, once somebody's gone from the country, they disappear from existence is not really true in American law.
All right. Danny Ceballos, appreciate you. Thank you so much. Pope Francis made his first public appearance yesterday since being discharged from the hospital 2 weeks ago. NBC's Matt Bodner joins us with that and some other world headlines. Matt, good morning.
Joe, good morning. Pope Francis was out and about in St. Peter's Square yesterday, making his first public appearance since he was discharged from the hospital 2 weeks ago. The Pope was brought out for a short appearance before crowds gathered at the Vatican to mark the Jubilee of the Sick. Francis wore oxygen tubes in his nose, and he gave brief remarks, wishing the crowd a happy Sunday and thanking them for their support. The Vatican separately released a statement attributed to the Pope in which he called for prayers of peace in Ukraine, Gaza, and many other places. Moving along now to Spain, tens of thousands of people joined protests across the country this weekend, making clear their anger with rising housing costs and no clear sign of relief on the horizon. Official figures say 15,000 took to the streets in Madrid, though organizers claim 10 times that number in fact joined in. There's a similar story in Barcelona, where official figures suggested 12,000 protesters, though organizers claimed over 100,000. These latest protests highlight growing social angst over housing prices, and the government is struggling to address it. We'll wrap up this hour in North Korea. The Hermit Kingdom on Sunday relaunched the Pyongyang International Marathon, last held 6 years ago. They welcomed 200 foreign visitors to make good on the international branding. There is some history to this race. It first ran back in 1981, and it's held annually in April to honor the birth of great leader Kim Il-sung. COVID put an end to that, but now it's back. North Korea has been dabbling in reopening foreign tourism in recent years, though only Russians have been allowed in. Joe?
All right, Matt, thank you so much. Coming up, deadly outbreak. Next, we're going to look at the rising number of measles cases after the virus claims the life of a second child in the South. We're also going to dig into how mass federal job cuts are impacting the public health response. We're back with growing concern over a measles outbreak after a second child died in Texas. The latest data from the CDC shows there are now more than 600 cases of measles in at least 21 states. As NBC News medical reporter Erica Edwards tells us, recent federal employee cuts are hampering the fight to stop the spread.
In Gaines County, Texas, an 8-year-old girl laid to rest after she contracted measles. State health officials attributing her death to pulmonary failure from the virus. In a statement saying the child was not vaccinated and had no reported underlying conditions. Nearly 500 measles cases have been reported in Texas since the outbreak began in late January, with 59 new cases just last week. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. writing that the most effective way to prevent the spread of measles is the MMR vaccine.
Is the community really prepared for further measles spread?
I think that's an ongoing set of conversations that we all are having. Honestly, I don't see a quick end to it.
This despite his history of spreading vaccine misinformation. While it's not clear if Kennedy attended the funeral, he says he traveled to Gaines County to console the girl's family, also noting that he's redeployed CDC teams to Texas. Recent massive federal funding cuts to local health departments nationwide already slowing efforts to stop the outbreak, with dozens of measles vaccine clinics in Texas canceled in the last week. The girl's death in Texas is the second of a child in the outbreak, growing at an alarming rate as families search for protection against the highly contagious virus. Erica Edwards, NBC News.
We're now joined by NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel with more on what we need to know about measles. Dr. Patel, good to have you with us. So the New York State Health Department issued an advisory late last Wednesday urging residents to get fully vaccinated against measles before traveling. But we should note, 500 or nearly 500 of the cases in the U.S. have been reported in Texas. At this point, just how concerned should people be about this virus?
Joe, I think if you're unvaccinated, you should be extremely concerned, and we can go over who are the most vulnerable to just getting infected if you're unvaccinated. But at this point, I would also just remind people that the measles is still prevalent internationally. So I think the travel advisory was very smart because not just New Yorkers, but many Americans are going to be traveling abroad. If you're vaccinated, you're protected. You can travel safely. If you're unvaccinated, you need to rethink some of the decisions you're making about travel and a couple of other things I would recommend.
So, yeah, let's talk about that. Who is most at risk of contracting measles right now, and what are some of your recommendations?
Top line, unvaccinated individuals writ large, but especially children under 5, pregnant women, immunocompromised people who might not even be able to get the vaccine. I just want to kind of underscore that point. Not everyone can qualify for the vaccine if you're immunocompromised with certain conditions, but I would also then, and the other end of the spectrum, the elderly as well. So anybody who could be at risk for not just contracting measles if you're unvaccinated, but remember, about 3% of infections are in vaccinated individuals. We call them breakthrough infections, and they can be in those vulnerable populations I just mentioned.
All right. While we have you, I want to ask you about a separate virus in California that does have some health officials worried. A third person has died from the hantavirus since February. You might recall that's the same disease that killed Gene Hackman's wife. Officials say it's rare, but still having 3 cases in a short period of time, that is cause for concern. Walk us through the symptoms here and what causes this.
Yeah, so hantavirus is otherwise known as kind of the 4 corners syndrome because we see it in states that have 4 corners: Colorado, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico. And I think that that's a good reminder of people in those populations to be especially vigilant. This is a virus that can be easily transmissible from rodent droppings. So any of us, and I used to live in one of those states for a very brief period of time, we're very used to kind of protections around rodent droppings, what to do with them, how to protect yourself. But sometimes visitors in these areas and sometimes new residents in these areas can be susceptible. So if you see any rodent droppings, avoid them, or at least make sure that you can contact local public health authorities for recommendations on how to deal with them. Symptoms primarily include pulmonary symptoms. That's when we start really ringing red bells and alarms, when we start to see people that kind of feel like they've got heavy fluid in their lungs, they can't take in a deep breath, they can start to develop severe fevers. Then they should present to an emergency room and talk about some of their symptoms in detail.
All right. Dr. Patel, as always, appreciate your advice. Thank you so much. Coming up, March Madness victory. Legendary UConn women's coach Gino Auriemma joins us to break down the Huskies' big win over the weekend. You are watching Morning News Now. Trade tensions certainly in the spotlight on this Monday morning. The Trump administration is considering new aid now for farmers. CNBC's Savannah Hanau has that and some other money news. Savannah, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning to you. Yes, so the Trump administration and lawmakers are weighing a new bailout for U.S. farmers as industry groups warn of economic fallout from tariffs. So the Wall Street Journal reports the amount of relief that could be needed is unclear. And Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins says the White House may not know until summer or even early fall, given many farmers are currently planting this season's crops. Late last year, Congress approved $10 billion in relief aid. Oil prices extending last week's losses, dropping to the lowest level in 4 years. Oil tumbling 7% on Friday as China ramped up tariffs on U.S. imports, escalating a trade war that's led investors to price in higher odds of a global recession, which would hit fuel demand. Now, Goldman Sachs cutting its oil price forecast today, and Saudi Arabia, that's the world's biggest exporter, announcing sharp cuts to prices it charges buyers in Asia. And KFC is now teeth-licking good. Yeah, that's right. You heard it. The fast food chain joining forces with Australian oral hygiene brand Hi Smile on fried chicken flavored toothpaste. It literally tastes like KFC's original recipe and comes with a red toothbrush with the KFB logo. Now, the dental kit was available on Hi Smile's website for $72, but it's already sold out, Joe.
What? Yeah. Does it come in extra crispy?
Ooh, I hope so.
I don't. Savannah, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
You got it.
I know you've heard this one before. The UConn Huskies stand alone as champions of women's college basketball. The Huskies reclaim their throne, really dominating South Carolina in last night's women's Division I final in Tampa Bay. This victory marks the program's 12th national title of all time, and even dozen their first since 2016. We're going to speak with UConn's legendary head coach, Gino Auriemma himself, in just a moment. But first, let's take a look at all the weekend's thrilling games as March Madness comes to a close with tonight's final on the men's side. For all the latest on all things March Madness, we're joined now by Baker Machado. He's the host of Front Office Sports Today, debuting soon. Baker, good to have you with us. So UConn was allegedly a number 2 seed.
I'm surprised.
Just got rid of all the number 1 seeds.
Oh, yes.
Dispatched of South Carolina, and I don't even think anyone could have predicted how big of a rout that was.
No, the 34-point win yesterday, the largest margin of victory in women's NCAA Final Four history. And if you look at how UConn performed the entire tournament, every single one of the games was a blowout. And as you mentioned, they were the number 2 seed. It was not USC with Juju Watkins, who was the one that got the number 1 seed, that prevailed at the end. It was UConn who was in that group that ended up doing this. And as you mentioned, this is the 13th national title win for UConn, which is an incredible moment for them. And Gino Auriemma winning all of these as well. And Paige Bueckers, what an incredible storied career. To think that they haven't won this since 2016. That was the last time that UConn ended up winning the national championship. She'd never won this.
Yeah, let's talk about Paige Bueckers, because last year we were talking about Caitlin Clark. This year it's Paige. She gets the national title that she always wanted. How does she rank among the greats of college basketball?
One of the greatest ever, and she's the presumptive number 1 pick of the WNBA draft here in the next couple of weeks. As I mentioned, she had never won this. She had gotten to the Final Four multiple times, but had never ended up winning this. She lost her freshman year to an ACL tear at the very beginning. But look, she has had a storied career, and now she's going to be going into the pros to be joining Caitlin Clark in the WNBA very soon.
Let's talk about the men's final now. First, we had some incredible action with the Final Four over the weekend. Houston and Florida both punching their tickets with just incredible games. Duke, who most people had at the top of the bracket, not in the final. What was the Final Four like?
I mean, this was an insane Final Four. To think that Duke, as you mentioned, who was the overwhelming favorite of most betting odds out there to win, lost at the very end to Houston. What an incredible game to see that happen. But now you basically have Houston, their 3rd trip to the finals, their first, though, since 1984, and their head coach, Kelvin Sampson, the 2nd winningest coach of all time to never win the national title. So obviously a big game for him as well. And Florida, back in the national championship game since the first time since 2006 and 2007 when they won it back-to-back with Billy Donovan. They've got one of the best players in the country right now in Walter Clayton Jr., who has been incredible. He's the first player since Larry Bird to have back-to-back 30-point games in the semifinals and in the Final Four.
Real quick, who's the favorite tonight?
I think the 1.5-point favorite for Florida right now, but Houston, don't forget, the best defensive team in the country. Tip-off at 8:40 p.m. Eastern. It is a late one, Joe. I don't know if you and I are going to stay up late for it.
But you gotta get to the end.
Yes.
You get to hear,
see what happens.
You get to hear the music. Thank you so much, Baker Machado. Good to have you with us. All right, now we are lucky to be joined by the coach with the most national championships in Division I college basketball history, Gino Auriemma. Coach, congratulations. Good to have you with us. You led the Huskies to a national championship back in 1995. Is number 12 just as sweet for you?
It is. It is. I mean, they all are. Never tired of, celebrating something like that. But as I've gotten older, I think it's more impactful on the kids that are doing it because they don't care about the other 11. They just know this is their first. So that is what makes it all very exciting.
You said this team has always clicked, but that your players fell in love with each other a few months ago. Talk about what it was like watching them build such a strong bond over the season.
I thought the early part was a little bit up and down. I thought we were a little bit resisting some of the coaching that we wanted. We're trying to incorporate some players that were a little bit older with a bunch of young guys that have not been in the mix, and it's taken a while. But about, I guess, a month and a half ago, whenever it was, we started to see them start to come together. And then that win at South Carolina, when we came back home, that kind of changed everything. And there was a feeling like we can be the best team in the country. And that standard of practice and commitment and paying attention to detail. They let us coach them, and they benefited from it, and so do we. The coaches enjoyed coaching them. They enjoyed playing, and it just kind of took off.
You're no stranger to success in your 40 years with the program, but you also said this is one of the most emotional Final Fours and national championships you've been a part of since that very first one. That says something. Why is that? Why has this meant so much to you?
Maybe the distance, the time between, you know, I love it when I hear people go, this is their first title since 2016. And I'm thinking to myself, there's teams that haven't won a title since 1816. You know, like, but because we're UConn, you know, that's like an eternity. So I just think there was a buildup, you know, of the whole program, everything. But more importantly, I think the narrative of this team, what's happened in the last 4 or 5 years, all the injuries, all the missed seasons, playing shorthanded, getting close, getting to the Final Four, and not having enough to get, you know, past the finish line. And then all of a sudden we show up with a team that can do that, and then we actually did it in dominating fashion the last, you know, 4 games that we played. And yeah, when Paige came off the floor, when that buzzer went off, it was pretty emotional for all of us, for sure.
Can you share what you whispered in Paige's ear there, what she said to you?
In the beginning, not much, nothing needed to be said. You know, it was just a culmination of a lot that we've been through together, that she's been through personally, individually. And, you know, in the end, I said, I love you, hoping that, you know, I got I love you. And I think she whispered it. I'm not quite sure what she said, you know. But in the end, it was just one of those moments that I think every coach and every player hopes to have when the season ends.
How quickly will you get back to work now? Do you get a little time to savor this?
Well, you know, this dumb stuff that you're dealing with today, you know, with the portal, people coming and going, you got to go home and recruit your own players, try to find new players, blah, 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 blah. So, yeah, it's going to be a kind of a busy week or two, whatever. But after that, I'm going to get in my car and say goodbye to the campus, and I'll see you in September.
Do you think about lucky number 13? Is that already on your mind?
I don't know. You know, we'll come to that. You know, I just think that if it takes another 9 years, I won't be around to see it. But you know, who knows? We got a pretty good team coming back next year, and we'll just roll the dice and see what happens.
All right. Coach Geno Auriemma, thank you so much for your time this morning. Congratulations again. We appreciate everything, and you taking some time to speak with us.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. Coming up, special celebration, the family birthday tradition that's going viral for taking one lucky grandfather on a trip down memory lane. That's next. We're back with how one family is inspiring millions of other families on social media to start a creative new birthday tradition. NBC News Now anchor Hallie Jackson introduces us to the Squillas, who surprised their grandpa on his 70th with a few blasts from the past.
Hey there, we've got a fun one for you about a family who really stepped up for their grandfather and the birthday he will never forget. This isn't just any birthday party. That's Dave Squilla sitting there celebrating his 70th with a twist, a blast from his past featuring his family. All 9 of his grandkids surprising him, dressing up as versions of him over the years. As a little boy, all grown up as Dad, and now their Papa, to the delight of the family and to so many others. Their video getting more than 10 million views online.
Dave, what did it mean for you to have your family come together to do this for you, for your birthday?
It was probably the best thing that I've had happen to me in a while. The kids did a great job.
It meant the world to his wife, Marlene.
I was so happy to see my husband so happy and smiling and giggling. It was very, very touching.
She and their daughter Amy were the brains behind the camera, finding the photos and putting the family to work.
The only thing that we had in-house was the snowmobile suit because he still wears that to snowblow the driveway.
On the big day, a quick change after dinner before the big debut.
It was my life, 9 pieces of my life, and with 9 of my grandchildren. It was going down memory lane.
It's not just Dave's family trying this trend. The Harrises in South Carolina showed out for their grandpa's 80th.
Oh my God.
And the Webb family in Tennessee dressed up as 7 eras of their grandpa. For so many, including the Squillas, it's all about committing to the bit.
Those socks are beautiful. I made them.
How did you hope to make your grandpa feel in that moment, Noah?
As long as he was happy and laughing, that's all that mattered to me.
And maybe a new birthday tradition filled with love and laughter.
What does that mean to you to know that you may be starting a tradition for other families down the road?
I'm obsessed that people were so intrigued by it and loved it so much. And I really hope that so many more people do it because it was just so fun.
Definitely a blast from the past in that celebration and so many others. Back to you.
All right, Hallie Jackson, thank you so much. That is going to do it for this hour of Morning News now, but stay with us. The news continues right now. Good morning, I'm Joe Fryer. Savannah is off right now on Morning News Now. Bracing for impact, Wall Street and Main Street investors eyeing the market fallout from President Trump's sweeping tariff plan. Mr. Trump catching heat over the weekend for posting this video on social media. Shows him golfing after days of tumultuous trading. It's all got some lawmakers on Capitol Hill expressing second thoughts on the commander-in-chief's economic overhaul. We've got team coverage in just a moment. States of emergency, a deadly swath of severe weather still battering parts of the South and the Midwest. Heavy rain leading to dangerous flash flooding in some spots, with water levels now expected to rise in the days to come. But when will folks finally see some relief from Mother Nature? Our Michelle Grossman has more on this soggy start to the work week. Also this morning, cover blown, the Trump administration pressing pause on Medicare and Medicaid, covering those massively popular weight loss drugs. But why, and what will it mean for the estimated 40% of American adults who are obese? We are watching your wallet. And Husky domination, the women of UConn basketball serving up a clinic on the court yesterday, handing South Carolina a stunning 23-point loss to clinch March Madness glory. But everything you might have missed as we look ahead to another clash of the Titans tonight. Florida taking on Houston to be crowned kings of the big dance. Let's begin this hour with the growing financial fallout from President Trump's trade tariffs. The trade war is raising fears of an economic recession, and it's spooking investors all around the world. Overnight, Asian stocks closed deep in the red, while European markets are currently plummeting. Here in America, Wall Street is bracing for another potentially terrible trading day, with U.S. futures pointing to another big sell-off. We've got a team standing by to talk about this and more. We're going to start things off at the New York Stock Exchange with NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans.
The president's 10% tariffs against most countries went into effect over the weekend. Asian and European markets are reeling, and even stricter tariffs go into effect later this week. That has new calls for a recession this morning, and investors dreading what's next. This morning, Wall Street is bracing for another nosedive, triggered by President Trump's global trade war. With those sweeping tariffs targeting America's trading partners, leading to a dramatic sell-off last week. Stocks plunging 10% over 2 days, erasing nearly $6 trillion of market value. And recession forecasts growing. J.P. Morgan now expecting the economy to contract under the weight of the tariffs, and that a recession will drive unemployment up to 5.3%. President Trump on Air Force One overnight asked about the turmoil.
Now, what's going to happen with the market, I can't tell you, but I can tell you our country has gotten a lot stronger.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on Meet the Press brushing off fears of a downturn.
There doesn't have to be a recession. Who knows how the market is going to react in a day, in a week. What we are looking at is building the long-term economic fundamentals for prosperity.
Fed Reserve Chair Jerome Powell at a business conference Friday said the Fed is waiting to see how tariffs will affect its economic outlook, warning they could lead to higher prices for consumers in the long run.
While tariffs are highly likely to generate at least a temporary rise in inflation, it's also possible that the effects could be more persistent.
All countries hit with a baseline tariff of 10%, with many charged much more, leading countries like China and Canada to respond with retaliatory tariffs. The president has suggested he's open to negotiations, but is setting trade deficits as a red line.
They're dying to make a deal, but I said, we're not going to have deficits with your country. We're not going to do that, because to me a deficit is a loss.
Meantime, anxiety and anger over the Trump administration's policies fueling protests from coast to coast over the weekend.
I think America is in terrible distress.
Trump and Musk have got to go!
More than 1,400 demonstrations, according to organizers, taking aim at the president and billionaire Elon Musk's efforts to slash the size of the federal government. Billionaire Trump backer Bill Ackman calls these tariffs a mistake, and he's urging President Trump to actually pause these tariffs for 90 days to negotiate. Here's what he writes. We are heading for a self-induced economic nuclear winter, and we should start hunkering down. Goldman Sachs saying if this week's new tariffs go into effect, it is a countdown to a recession. Back to you.
Christine, thank you. It's not just an economic fallout. There's been a lot of political fallout from President Trump's plan for these sweeping tariffs on countries worldwide. On top of that, the president is facing new backlash for spending time at his Florida golf course while Americans brace for the tariffs. Some Republicans are now doubting the tariff plan altogether. NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez joins us now with the latest developments from the White House. Gabe, good morning.
Hi there, Joe. Good morning. President Trump is set to meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu here later today. They're expected to discuss not just the war in Gaza, but also the president's tariffs. The White House has offered mixed messages on the reason behind them, and now even some Republicans are sounding the alarm.
Facing mounting pressure, this morning President Trump is not backing down, calling his tariffs a beautiful thing to behold and arguing he's fulfilling a campaign promise to bring back American jobs.
I don't want anything to go down, but sometimes you have to take medicine to fix something.
But with markets reeling and 401ks plummeting, the president is also drawing new backlash for spending the past few days at his golf course in Florida and posting on social media this video of himself golfing over the weekend. The White House announcing he'd won his second round matchup and would advance to the championship round.
How was the golf tournament?
Very good, because I won.
That may end up being the most enduring image of the Trump presidency. That is the president out on a golf cart while people's retirement is in flames.
Returning to Washington on Air Force One last night, the president downplaying the possible economic fallout.
I don't think inflation is going to be a big deal.
But some Republicans and Trump allies are having second thoughts, including Elon Musk, who appeared to break with the president on tariffs.
I hope it is agreed that both Europe and the United States should move, ideally, in my view, to a zero tariff situation, effectively creating a free trade zone.
In the Senate, a proposed bipartisan bill would limit the president's power to impose tariffs, including allowing Congress to vote to end them. It's largely symbolic and unlikely to pass. Still, this weekend, the first House Republican came out against the president's plan.
The Constitution is clear. The House and the Senate, Congress has the power of tariffs and taxes.
Even conservative Senator Ted Cruz of Texas is warning Republicans what an ongoing trade war could mean for the party.
A recession, particularly a bad recession, 2026 in all likelihood politically would be a bloodbath.
But for now, Republicans are not standing in the president's way. The Senate is moving forward with what he calls a big, beautiful bill of tax breaks and spending cuts, even as global markets are on edge. Joe.
All right, Gabe, thank you so much. Investopedia's editor-in-chief, Caleb Silver, joins us now with a more in-depth look at all this and what it means for your bottom line. A lot of people waking up this morning, they're worried, there is anxiety. How should we navigate this financial turmoil right now?
It's very difficult as an individual investor because you had nothing to do with this. It's not a black swan event. This is a policy brought on by this administration that is tanking the markets, and watching your 401k, your investments go down day after day is very difficult. Assume that there's going to be a lot more volatility. This may not be the worst, and make sure you have a plan for what may come next. And we don't know what that is, but if you can't handle the losses, make sure you have a rule in your portfolio that says beyond a certain point, we get out of the market. When it comes back, we don't know, but we want to make sure that our money's safe. For those people that have a long-term time horizon, dips like this are good, but you don't know where this is going to end. So I say be patient here. We're in the very early days of this. This is going to be a long week, and I think volatility is the name of the game.
What do investors want to hear right now?
They want to hear that there's some room for negotiation here, that there's some room to find a middle ground. And there are three basic paths here. We can negotiate, we can get some bilateral, multilateral trade agreements and get back to growth and not go into a recession. Or this is just the beginning and it could get worse, right? And we could get more reciprocal tariffs. That could take us from stagflation, which is slowing growth, rising unemployment and rising prices, right into a recession. Not good for the economy, not good for investors. Or this is the beginning of a full-blown trade war. We already know retaliatory tariffs are coming, and that could lead to a global recession.
We've heard the Trump administration say this is short-term pain for long-term gain, but many analysts point out bringing all these manufacturing jobs back, that doesn't take days, it doesn't take weeks, it could take 5 years. I mean, do people have the patience to go through this, to essentially restructure the world order and how we do these jobs right now?
Not people who have been depending on their savings and their investments to take them through retirement. And we know that's a growing amount of people who are counting on that. The average 401k balance for baby boomers was about $250,000 at the end of the year. Now they're looking at around $200,000, and they're thinking, how can I make this stretch out? So yeah, it's going to take a long time to restructure this economy. In the meantime, how many jobs are going to be lost, right? How deep is this recession going to go if we end up having one? And how many more losses can people take in their 401ks and in their IRAs? And they're losing trust in the stock market and our capital markets. That's one of the bedrocks of growth in this country.
We heard from Fed Chair Jerome Powell late last week. He basically warned it's likely they will see higher inflation, slower growth. Is there anything the central bank can do here to try and offset the impact of these tariffs?
Yeah, I was in the room when he actually said that in front of a bunch of business journalists, and the Fed might be forced into an emergency rate cut if things get worse. But this is not how this Federal Reserve likes to operate. We know in the past, during COVID, we had an emergency rate cut. 1987, we had an emergency rate cut. 2008. But this is very different because this is an administration that has put this policy forward. If the Fed cuts rates now, it's caving into that and not doing the best scenario for the American people. Lowering rates causes inflation to spike as well.
And the fear is if we have a recession, but we also have inflation, that's a worst-case scenario.
That is an absolute worst-case scenario. That spells long-term recession. That's really tough for middle to low-income people that are just getting by and have watched prices rise for the past few years. Take them through an economic recession like that. High unemployment, high prices, not a good recipe for growth in this country, and that looks like possibly the worst-case scenario.
All right, Caleb Silver, good to have you with us. Thank you so much. Now to this deadly saga of severe weather that's pummeling the Midwest and South for nearly a week now. The latest chapter, a new round of violent tornadoes and storms, plus widespread flooding with water levels in some spots expected to rise for days. For the latest, let's bring in NBC News correspondent Maggie Vespa. She's live in Dawson Springs, Kentucky, which simply put, is underwater this morning. Maggie, good morning.
Yeah, Joe, exactly. Well put. I mean, the police chief here in Dawson Springs tells me he's actually never seen flood waters this bad, never seen them this high. We can zoom in here. You can see that sign for a city park. That's underwater. The park's completely underwater. That gas station in the background submerged. Some cities across this region saying they saw as much as 5 feet of water in 24 hours. River levels rising. And this is just part of that days-long deadly string of severe weather that just won't let up.
Battered by days of violent storms, this morning, millions across the Midwest and South now facing widespread flooding.
We've never got this much rain at one time.
Flash flooding drenching multiple states, tearing apart roads and forcing rescues. In Louisville, river levels rose 5 feet in just 24 hours. Drone video showing this levee breaking in Owensboro, Kentucky, near the Indiana border. Authorities say no one was hurt. And in Dawson Springs, water reaching this substation, forcing crews to temporarily cut power.
What's so striking about it?
That it hasn't stopped rising yet.
researchers say flood events like this are growing more severe amid the climate crisis. Authorities saying in the last week, at least 21 people have died amid flooding and storms after dozens of twisters ripped through multiple states, including a 5-year-old in Arkansas killed after a tree fell on a home, and 9-year-old Gabriel Andrews swept away by flash floodwaters in Kentucky while walking to his school bus.
We are deeply saddened at this horrific tragedy.
Across the region, crews now working around the clock to help people clean up from these disasters. Kentucky farmer Austin Chappell is still rebuilding after losing his home to a tornado last May. He's now using this boat to feed his cattle, stranded on higher ground.
The Lord gave us them cattle, you know, and it's our duty to take care of them.
Protect them.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody just doing what they can amid all of this. And again, this is far from over. Some spots expect to see rivers still rising for several more days. Some cities fearing they may not crest until Wednesday at the earliest, Joe.
All right, Maggie, thank you so much. Let's get a closer look now at what to expect this week with your Morning News Now weather. Meteorologist Michelle Grossman has the forecast. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. And as Maggie mentioned, we're going to continue to watch those rivers rising. I will show you that map in just a few minutes, but a lot of gauges at moderate and major levels already, and that will continue to increase over the next several days. So for today, we are looking at that front still making its way along the East Coast. It will not clear until later on tonight into tomorrow morning. So days and days of watching this front move. It is finally moving. That's the good news. But we are looking at the chance for severe storms. We've already had reports of tornadoes this morning, and the bullseye will be in the southeast as we go throughout the afternoon to evening hours because the ingredients are all there for severe storms. Notice that rain stretches into portions of the northeast. We even have the chance for some snow on the northern fringe of this system with that colder air working in. The middle of the country, we are chilly. We're looking at temperatures 20, 30 degrees below normal. We woke up with freeze warnings this morning. We're going to see that once again. And we are sunny and mild in the southwest. The west will be unsettled today with several fronts moving onshore. So we have that mountain snow and that valley rain. By Wednesday, a little quieter, especially on the East Coast. Still chilly for April, especially in portions of the Northeast, New England, but we are quiet. We're going to be dry. That is good news. And that's good news in the Mid-South because we're going to continue to have those cleanup efforts. A few showers in the Ohio Valley, the Great Lakes as well. Hot for the Southwest, hot in the Southwest. It's always hot, it seems, in the past week it has been. And we're looking at dry conditions in the Pacific Northwest as well. By Friday, sun and clouds throughout the northern plains, the upper Midwest, the Great Lakes. Notice, though, another storm, the next storm throughout parts of the Northeast, New England, into the Carolinas and parts of the Southeast, looking to be wet on Friday. And we're looking at that warmth continuing in the southwest, and records will be broken. Radar showing us that we are tracking lots of lightning throughout the southeast. That is prompting severe weather. Again, we will be watching this all day long. We're looking at some heavy rain, too. That's where you're seeing those yellows, the reds, the oranges. Notice the blue on the map. That's in northern New England into New Hampshire, Vermont, parts of the Great Lakes, because that colder air is worked in, and we're looking at some snow falling in. We will see accumulating snow not only today, but tomorrow as well. And then we have a wintry mix. That's where you're seeing that pink. It's a little line throughout parts of the interior parts of the Northeast. So either sleet, some freezing rain falling on this Monday morning. Flood alerts where you see the red, those are flood warnings. That means flooding is happening now. So that's a big chunk of the area here. And that's because that river flooding. So you want to stay away from the banks, any low-lying areas. And this is why all these little dots are indicating gauges. So where you see the red, those are moderate flooding at the gauge, and major flooding. And again, this will increase over the next several days. This is a story that lasts longer because it takes a little longer for those rivers to rise, and it kind of stays in place for a while before it starts to recede. There's that front. We're going to track it throughout the day. It's going to finally move off the coast tonight, and then tomorrow we're going to start to dry out in most places. Joe, we're still looking at accumulating snow, though, tomorrow in portions of northern Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. And we could see over 5 inches in some spots, especially in northern Maine. Back to you.
April snow. Michelle, thank you so much. Now for the latest on the rapidly spreading measles outbreak across the country. This morning, another death is adding to the concerns. The Texas Health Department now reporting cases of the disease have shot up to nearly 500. NBC News correspondent Priscilla Thompson is in Texas with the latest. Priscilla, good morning.
Joe, good morning. A nightmare scenario continues to unfold on the ground here, largely among unvaccinated children. Doctors over this weekend at this hospital confirming that a child died from pulmonary failure related to measles. This is the second unvaccinated child to die from the virus amid a rapid spread. This morning, the measles outbreak in Texas growing more deadly. Health officials confirming an unvaccinated school-aged child in Lubbock with no reported underlying conditions is now the second to die from the highly contagious virus.
We have lost a bit of our future, which could have been prevented with a vaccine that is 97% effective.
The victim, an 8-year-old girl named Daisy, according to Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who traveled to Texas Sunday to attend the girl's funeral. Afterward, Kennedy, a vaccine skeptic who has spread misinformation in the past and downplayed measles risk, writing on social media, the most effective way to prevent the spread of measles is the MMR vaccine, his most direct statement yet. More than 600 cases have been reported nationwide this year, more than 480 of them in Texas alone, including a 14% spike in just the last week.
We just don't know how bad it's going to get.
Megan Messick owns this daycare where the rapidly spreading virus has infected 6 kids and says she's frustrated with the federal government's response.
Our city needs more. We need more federal help. Our testing is behind. I mean, kids getting tested on a Friday and we're not getting the results till Monday, sometimes Tuesday. That's a huge problem.
The question on so many minds this morning, when will it end? Pediatrician Ana Montanez is on the front lines in Lubbock.
I don't see a quick end to it. There is a very real possibility that we may be dealing with this for an entire year, if not more.
And Joe, recent massive federal funding cuts are slowing efforts to contain this virus. Those cuts to local health departments just in the last week, dozens of vaccine clinics have been canceled across the state of Texas. Now, when RFK Jr. was here yesterday, he said that he would be redeploying CDC teams to this area and working with the state to contain the outbreak. Joe?
All right. Priscilla, thank you so much. Much more to come on this hour of Morning News Now. A little later, why we're digging into why the Trump administration is pressing pause on Medicare and Medicaid, covering those mega popular weight loss drugs like Ozempic. First, after the break, Pope Francis back in the public eye, the surprise appearance that comes just 2 weeks after the pontiff left the hospital. Those stories and more, joined by our own Vicky Wynn, next. We're back with a surprise appearance from Pope Francis at the Vatican's special Jubilee Mass on Sunday. It was his first public appearance since leaving the hospital 2 weeks ago. The pontiff greeted crowds in St. Peter's Square from his wheelchair. He repeatedly wished those attending Mass a happy Sunday. NBC News international correspondent Molly Hunter joins us now from London with more. Molly, good morning. So what more can you tell us about this surprise appearance yesterday?
Hey, Joe, that's right. It's nice to have some good news to report about the Pope. So we do know it was obviously completely unexpected. No one got the tip-off. So some very lucky people, of course, out in St. Peter's Square. We also know from the Holy See press office, that the Pope had confessed in St. Peter's Basilica before he passed through the Holy Door before arriving at the square. And he arrived towards the end of the Mass. And then, as you said, he spent some time greeting well-wishers and greeting the faithful there in the square.
Molly, we can see he's using supplemental oxygen there. What is the latest we know about the state of the Pope's health?
Yeah, one of the things that we really noticed yesterday is that his voice sounds stronger when he did say hello to the crowd. And he didn't say much, Joe. And then, of course, we picked up a few comments that he said to people on the ground. But his voice sounds stronger. That's good. The Vatican also says that he is overall improving. But they do say he uses high-flow supplemental oxygen as needed, was the phrasing, Joe.
All right. And we know this is a big time of the year for the Pope. He was in the hospital during the start of Lent. So a cardinal led the Ash Wednesday services that traditionally the Pope presides over. Easter now, less than 2 weeks away. Do we know the Vatican's plan for the upcoming services and celebrations, Monday, Thursday, Good Friday, and Easter?
Yeah, that's right. Big time of year for the Pope is an understatement. The Vatican has removed all of the official obligations from the Pope's calendar, so we are waiting to see. Now, we do expect an update from the Vatican tomorrow, Joe, about possibly his health, possibly what events during Holy Week he may participate in. The word that the Vatican and the Holy See press office has been using is premature. So clearly, Joe, they're waiting to see how he's feeling. No doubt, of course, he wants to be involved, at least show up to as many events as possible. So we will keep you posted if we learn anything new from the Vatican tomorrow.
And no doubt so many people hope that they will get to see him again. I feel like the square is going to get a little more crowded, hoping for another surprise sometime soon. All right.
I think some people are booking their flights to Rome, Joe.
All right, Molly, thank you so much. Appreciate it. 2 lawmakers from the United Kingdom say that they were denied entry to Israel and deported over the weekend. NBC's Matt Bodner has that and some other world headlines. Matt, good morning.
Joe, good morning. The 2 British lawmakers say that they were part of an official parliamentary delegation, but the Israelis are saying this is false. Israel's immigration ministry said in a statement to Sky News that the 2 were planning to, quote, document the activities of security forces and spread anti-Israel hatred. The lawmakers in question are Yuan Yang and Abtisa Mohammed. In a joint statement, the 2 said that they were, quote, astounded to be denied entry. They added that they believe it is, quote, vital that parliamentarians are able to witness firsthand the situation in the occupied Palestinian territory. Moving along now to the Congo, major flooding in the capital of Kinshasa has killed at least 22 people and cut off access to more than half of the city and also the main international airport. Authorities say that most of the fatalities so far were caused by collapsing walls and that the main road to the airport was damaged. However, repairs have allowed partial reopening of this road, and full service is expected to be restored in short order. This road also connects the capital to the rest of Congo, raising concerns over impact on trade. And we'll wrap up this hour in Japan, where a global surge in demand for matcha has locals worried about a domestic shortage. Matcha is hand-milled into the popular green powder you've no doubt seen on all kinds of menus at this point. And social media has sent international demand for the tea to the moon. Shortages began hitting Japan last fall, prompting tea companies to impose purchase limits on the powder. Further shortages are expected this year. The global market value expected to double by 2028. Meanwhile, the government is looking at incentivizing expansion of matcha production in Japan. Back to you.
From wildfires and tornadoes to snowstorms and hurricanes, it feels like weather events across the U.S. are becoming more destructive and more deadly with each passing year. Well, scientists say a lot of that extreme weather can be linked back to Antarctica. New research shows that polar ice is melting faster than ever, which is driving a remarkable and concerning rise in sea level. In the U.S. alone, experts predict it will rise nearly 2 feet on coastal regions over the next 2 decades. NBC News national climate reporter Chase Kane explained.
9,000 miles away, at the bottom of the planet, a trip to Antarctica might feel less like crossing the ocean and more like crossing the galaxy.
And this feels like the closest we might ever get to experiencing another planet.
When I first tried to describe Antarctica,
you see this.
Or when I hoped its residents would play along.
So this looks like a healthy, happy seal, but actually in this region near Antarctica, they went away.
I felt the challenge of squeezing this place into a screen.
It's a kind of a magic place. You know, it grabs you.
James Barnes co-founded the Antarctic and Southern Ocean Coalition in 1978 to help conserve and protect a place that is not just environmentally unique, but politically unique. No country owns it. Instead, it's common ground with a common goal: science.
On a larger scale, too, it's about friendship. The friendship between nations that are not maybe naturally friends. And so what they can cooperate on is science, and the science there is so crucial to our future.
The discovery in Antarctica.
And a lesson from the 1980s proved just how true that is.
It is an unprecedented event.
Only 2 years after Antarctic scientists discovered the hole in the ozone layer, the world banded together to solve the problem. Now, NASA says the ozone hole should fully heal within our lifetime. It is a sign of what's possible, but also a cautionary tale not to ignore what's happening here.
Interacts with climate change, especially the Antarctica.
Tourists who make the trip with HX Expeditions see the truth of climate change firsthand.
All the way down, yeah.
Often braving tough conditions to collect samples and data for scientists around the world.
Allowing people to understand the consequences of changes into a system. I mean, everything is connected. Everything needs to be in a balance, right? And
Verena Maraldi created HX's science program 7 years ago. And today it supports scientists from dozens of universities researching things like how krill,
and you see the facets,
a critical food source for Antarctic wildlife, are becoming more scarce. And that is creating ripple effects for fisheries in the US. So basically what happens here impacts everything from our food to flooding along our coasts.
we often think what happens at the poles stays at the poles,
But that is not true. We live on a planet where everything is connected. And in fact, sea level is rising twice as fast now as it was just 25 years ago because all of that ice is melting so fast.
In the next 25 years, NOAA projects sea levels will rise up to 8 inches along the west coast and up to 1.5 feet along the Gulf. And a lot of that extra water is flowing to our shores from Antarctica, where as ice melts into the Southern Ocean, it also changes the water temperature, which can change ocean currents. And those drive weather patterns all the way back home, putting everyone from firefighters to farmers on the front lines of climate change. And Antarctica shows how it's all intertwined.
Make those connections between the dangers that are happening and also the beauty of what we need to preserve. I mean, when you're kayaking up front with a whale, where you see the glaciers and the magical ice, you just want to protect it. Like, you're gonna go, I have to protect that.
Showing this place can change you as much as we've changed it. From Antarctica, I'm National Climate Reporter Chase Kane.
Coming up, turning back time. When we come back, the anti-aging beauty products taking social media by storm, but do they actually work? We are talking with the experts next. We are back now with the Trump administration putting a stop to a Biden-era proposal on Medicare and Medicaid that would have included obesity as part of its coverage. Now, more than 7 million people are enrolled in these plans. NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Chung joins me now with more on this. Hey, Brian, good morning to you. Good morning. So walk us through this proposal. Who will be the most impacted by these potential plans, and why are they putting the brakes on this?
Yeah, it actually sounds like it's more than a proposal. They're basically scrapping a rule that would have expanded the coverage of GLP-1 drugs under Medicare Part D for use for weight loss reasons. Now, I want to point out for Medicare right now, you can have it covered for GLP-1 drugs if you're using it for conditions like cardiovascular disease or diabetes, but you cannot use it for weight loss. The Biden administration had proposed expanding it to cover weight loss, but the Trump administration is scrapping that. So it will not happen, although I want to point out for those that are on Medicaid, you still in some cases might be able to get GLP-1 coverage under your state, but it depends on what state you live in.
I mean, so many people struggle with obesity, have obesity and the related diseases. Sometimes, like over the summer, we saw this shortage in the weight loss drugs. How accessible are these meds now?
Yeah, well, I mean, first off, they're a lot more prevalent than they used to be, but I want to point out that they're also very expensive. So in some cases, it can be something like upwards of $11,000 per year. So the ways to get around those costs would be, for example, one, looking at any sort of company discounts that are out there. And then secondly, there are some cash-only discounts that are offered directly from the providers. So if you look at products like Zepbound and Wegovy, they offer these out-of-pocket sales of vials. Right. You cannot use your insurance, but you could pay upfront in cash, and you can, in many cases, save thousands of dollars that way. But then lastly, there are now these, and this is very interesting, these buy now, pay later products where you can actually pay for your GLP-1 drugs using installment loans. A firm teamed up with a company called Future Health to make that available. But I want to point out, with buy now, pay later products, just make sure you're on top of that.
Yeah, because it really is like a little mini loan, and you do need to make those payments or it can really affect your credit adversely. Absolutely. What about financing? If your insurance company won't cover these weight loss medicines, is there what kind of financing options are available when it comes to medicine?
Yeah, well, in some cases there are some, like nonprofits and other organizations that can help with financing. But the latest trend is, as of a few weeks ago, that kind of buy now, pay later. I wouldn't be surprised to see more companies unveil something like that. But the same usual caveats apply when it comes to using BNPL products to pay for big ticket items, which could be thousands of dollars per month, which is make sure you're on top of it. Be aware that if you don't pay it on time, it can hurt your credit score, even if you're not paying interest. And then make sure that you are keeping tabs of the debt that you're accumulating. One issue with buy now, pay later products is that you just might lose track of the payments. And if you do miss that, it can take a hit on your credit score. Some of these companies actually do report you to the agencies. So just be aware of that if you do use those products.
All right, we appreciate that breakdown. Thank you so much, Brian Chung. And now let's take a closer look at those anti-aging devices. They're designed to help you reduce fine lines and get rid of acne. They're also designed to be used at home. So I tried several of them and talked with the experts to get the lowdown on just how well they work.
This is the best device. This is worth the hype.
This is the star of the show.
With millions of views on social media, new beauty devices advertising their products can give you that spa treatment at home. Each tool uses different technology and sometimes a combination of treatments they say can clear acne, smooth fine lines, and firm up your skin by boosting collagen production. Board-certified dermatologist Melissa Levine says her patients are obsessed.
Should I buy them? Do they work? And so I always tell people they work. They work because these are proven technologies that we've been doing for years to decades.
But she says the results will vary depending on the device, how often you use it, and your overall skin health. We bought 3 different devices, the SolarWave Red Light Wand, the new Face Mini, and the TheraFace Pro to see how easy they are to use. First up, the least expensive option, the SolarWave Wand, which right now is selling for about $135. The brand says it uses red light, galvanic current, facial massage, and therapeutic warmth, adding people who used it reported it smoothed their fine lines, depuffed, and faded their blemishes.
So it's really small, lightweight, easy to use. I can feel the warmth. Probably pretty easy to travel with as well.
How long does it typically take of using these devices before you might notice a change in your face?
4 to 6 weeks.
Next up, the new Face Mini, more expensive at $250. The device uses microcurrent to sculpt, lift, and contour. The maker saying 9 in 10 users saw a lifted appearance, a reduction in the appearance of deep lines, and improvement in the appearance of sagging skin after 60 days of use.
I'm gonna put this gel on to help conduct the electricity. It's like a little tiny tingling sensation.
They recommend using the device at least 5 minutes a day, 5 times a week for the first 2 months, then 2 to 3 times a week to maintain results.
When you apply these low-level electrical currents on the skin, that can kind of tone the skin by stimulating the facial muscles.
And finally, the most expensive device we tried, the TheraFace Pro, which retails for about $400. In addition to red light therapy, the maker says it has blue light to help reduce acne, microcurrent, and infrared light therapy that warms skin to reduce pain.
This is the only device of the 3 that has a massage feature. Ooh. Oh my word. I can definitely feel it.
It also has an attachment to cleanse and massage the skin. The makers say after 12 weeks, 94% of users saw overall healthier skin and 89% saw a decrease in wrinkles and dark spots.
Sometimes you just don't need all of that technology.
If you plan to invest, dermatologist Tabasum Mir says go beyond social media to do your research. Look at the device's technical specs and product reviews.
Sometimes we're suffering from over-consumerism, which is then causing you to put too much on your skin, and that can actually create a lot more harm and inflammation.
While both doctors say overall these products are safe and can work, consult with your doctor first. You could have a bad reaction if you have pre-existing health conditions.
I would definitely recommend having a conversation with your physician.
As for me, the devices made me more committed to my overall skincare routine. Both doctors recommend patients who are impatient to consider professional treatments. They're more powerful with faster results.
This is much more powerful, but for maintenance, something at home could be helpful?
Sure, it can be helpful. And there you have it. It is important to note these are cosmetic devices. They're not medical devices. And you'll sometimes see the makers advertising that they're FDA cleared. That just means the device has been cleared for home use. And also, just remember, the key here is to be consistent, as the doctor said. Otherwise, this just becomes another piece of electronic waste stuffed under your sink. Always talk to a doctor, ideally a dermatologist, before you invest. And if you feel any pain or your skin has a bad reaction, stop using that device right away. We are back now with a recent Consumer Reports investigation. For anyone who's bought a car in the last 5 years, automakers may be tracking and selling your driver data. This could include mileage, hard brakes, or how fast you accelerate. Reporter Tanya Luviano-Horwitz from NBC San Diego explains what you can do about it.
That new car of yours isn't just tracking your mileage. A new Consumer Reports investigation reveals that nearly every major automaker in the U.S. is collecting so-called driver behavior data. Everything from how hard you brake to how fast you accelerate.
We poured through thousands of pages of privacy policies, and we questioned 15 different automakers that sell vehicles here in the United States.
Consumer Reports investigative reporter Derek Kravitz says that automakers gather this information often without drivers fully understanding what they've agreed to.
Most drivers simply click agree when they're setting up their car's infotainment system, and they unknowingly give permission for their data to be collected and then shared.
Many automakers say they get your consent before sharing data and only pass it to trusted partners. But when Consumer Reports ask them to name these companies, nearly all refuse to say who.
We found that your driving data often ends up with insurance companies and lenders who can use it to determine premiums and loan terms. This creates what experts call a driver score, and that's pretty similar to a credit score.
This is a way to take control of your data. Most automakers allow consumers to submit requests to limit data sharing or delete their information completely. Often you can complete an online form on the automaker's website or change privacy settings through your car's connected mobile app. But there's often a trade-off. Opting out could mean losing access to features like roadside assistance, crash detection, or remote door locking. Bottom line, taking just a few minutes to check your privacy options could keep your driving habits from becoming someone else's profit.
Really fascinating. Thank you to Tanya Luviano-Hurwitz for that report. In 2020, California was the first state to require companies to give their customers the option to opt out after of having their information shared or sold. 15 other states have enacted similar privacy laws since then. 3 more states have similar laws set to take effect next year. All right, more money headlines now. Samsung says its Mexico-made TVs are staying out of Trump's tariff fire, giving it an advantage over the competition. CNBC's Silvana Henao joins me now with that and other money news. Hey, good morning, Silvana.
Hey, Vicky, good morning to you. So Samsung says that its TV business will likely be less affected by U.S. tariffs than rivals because the majority of its products are made in Mexico, which largely escaped President Trump's 10% baseline and steeper reciprocal tariffs. Now, Samsung will still track changes in policy and does plan to allocate production across about 10 different hubs around the world. TikTok will stay on Apple's App Store for at least 2 more months after receiving assurances from U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi. Now, President Trump signing an executive order on Friday to extend the deadline for TikTok's Chinese parent company ByteDance to sell its U.S. operations or face a ban. Now, Bloomberg reports Bondi wrote a letter to Apple saying it won't be penalized for hosting the app on its platform. Apple hasn't responded to a request for comment. And Easter is fast approaching, and, well, Krispy Kreme has some new donuts to celebrate this season. It's unveiling the Hoppy Easter collection today with 3 new flavors, all available in store or for pickup and delivery through Krispy Kreme's app and website. And they include a bunny basket donut. This is an original glaze dipped in chocolate icing and decorated with chocolate buttercream and topped with a candy bunny, Vicky.
Wow, that donut's doing a whole lot, Silvana.
Yeah,
the whole chocolate bunny, too. It is Easter, after all. All right, Silvana, thank you so much.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.